Welcome back to Omega Ronin The Podcast. We've made it to the third episode where I'll be walking you through the newest album titled Godforsaken Journey, song by song. A Godforsaken Journey indeed. I'll talk about what I used to make each song, the inspiration, and I just finished mixing this album. So to be perfectly honest, I'm totally sick of it. It's kind of like I've been hanging out with a bunch of friends all week, and like I just want them to go home. Like, go away. That's how I feel about it at the moment, but hopefully you'll feel differently. I'm going to kick this off here with the first track, one of my favorites from the album. This is Gravity Betrays, which starts with the Sonicware Mega Synthesis and then explodes into the Roland Gaia 2 and a bunch of other stuff. So hopefully you heard the last podcast where I talked about my late night routine where I hang out with one of my synthesizers and headphones and just build sounds and sequences. The lead that you hear, the da-da-da-da, is something I created on the Roland Gaia 2. I made the sound, which is a pretty interesting sound by itself, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I poked away on the keyboard for a little bit until I came up with that sequence and then saved it and then stored it away for a little while. And then as I went to create this album, I unearthed the sequence and created a bass line for it, and the two of them just clicked, like immediately, first try. There's something about the gritty, distorted Sonicware bass line that just matched the lead perfectly, and I threw some heavier drums on there. And this was like just one take to get the core of the song. Now there's a lot of fiddly bits in there and details, but like the main sound just came together like magic. I think it's pretty incredible that this little Sonicware synthesizer provides enough bass and character to rise above the big Roland keyboards in this song and hold the whole thing together while also providing a lot of just details and distortion and just like filter effects and the grittiness to the sound. It's just everything just kind of worked out really, really well on this one, which is probably why it's the first song on the album. I think it's a good entry point into Godforsaken Journey. Now, the previous album that I made is titled Mega Uniframe Super Hyper Armor, and the entire album was built on the Sonicware Mega Synthesis because it's inspired by 16-bit Sega Genesis video game soundtracks. This album is meant to be a darker, more sinister, just kind of like darkwave industrial sound. So this is an experimental album, and I like that Gravity Betrays is a nice segue between Mega Uniframe Super Hyper Armor and the rest of this album, which doesn't really feature the Mega Synthesis as much. Now this brings me to the second track, which I named after the album because I had the album name and artwork done before I finished the album, which I like to do to have some sort of visual inspiration and like a representation of where this thing is going in my head. And I really like the dragon artwork, and so this song, I created this next song and then gave it the album title because it deserves it. And this is a listen to Godforsaken Journey. This has been a very difficult album from the producing standpoint because I wanted to try something with Omega Ronin that I've never done before, and I went to the analog gear quite a bit. And analog sounds incredible, and it's great for coming up with just some wild sounds and happy accidents, but it's very difficult to use if you're on a producing schedule. So I had to somehow find time in my life to just relax with the matriarch, this Moog keyboard, which is just incredible, but it's very difficult to use. It takes a long time to dial in specific sounds and create sounds. Then you have to manually document them, unlike the Gaia 2 or something where you create a sound and then just save it as a preset. You have to literally create every sound on the analog gear from scratch. And it's like never the same twice. So if you get something good, you got to record it that day. And then I have to keep the keyboard like set up that way so I can't use it for something else until I'm done with the song. So this song kind of clogged up the schedule for a little while on the matriarch, but it's worth it. There's a lot of background effects that I built just experimenting with different drones and different settings. And I built the bass line and like the background effects and the drum line. And then I sat there and just said, this needs like one more piece, but I didn't know what to do. I poked around on the other keyboards and nothing quite fit. And then I eventually changed settings on the matriarch back to one of my bass settings, and that's when I came up with the using the pitch wheel. Something so simple, but it just worked perfectly and just carries the album, earning the title track because of the pitch wheel. That neat helicopter sound in there is Matriarch. Now the next track is titled Illumination Singularity, and this one starts off with a couple different sequences I recorded on the Gaia 2, experimenting with different sounds. The drum line is interesting in that it comes straight out of the Mega synthesis and provides a unique mono character with a lot of energy, and then the keys on the lead keyboard is Juno X. So it's not often that you're going to have the drum line provided by the Mega synthesis with a lead from the Juno. That one turned into a big song. I like to have at least one really big song per album if possible. That one's got some Skull Bomb influence in there with the high pitch notes, and I adjusted one of my settings from Skull Bomb to actually create that. And while this is not a particularly dark song, it is a heavier song, and the album does get a good bit weirder and more bizarre from here. But I'm perfectly okay with this, producing different styles on for streaming services. and producing as many songs as possible for streaming, because if you're going to stream them, you're not paying per song, you're just like infinitely streaming music, so why not just create as much as possible? And I don't really worry about if the song isn't my favorite song. I like them to all be technically solid and well produced, but sometimes I come up with stuff and I'm like, that's maybe not my favorite song, but perhaps it's your favorite song, who knows? It came out of Omega Ronin, so I don't worry at all about mashing up genres or possibly releasing too much. I just make as much as I can. And I think that actually makes good business sense. It's fun, and you never know what might catch on out there. So maybe it'll be this next song, 5,000 Dimensions, which has a lead that I created on the Roland Gaia 2. This one is a very simple song, but with a lot of motion. And I created the original, the sound, the underlying sound that then turned into the sequence, that distorted, weird sequence in the background. But there's so much going on in that. That's one of the things that's cool about the Gaia 2, is you can just make stuff that's out of this world. A combination of like digital and analog sounds all moving together. And it's hard to put a lead on top of that sometimes, because then you lose the character of that just messy, sloppy sequence in the first place. So I just stumbled across this weird bass line that doesn't fit at all, but it works perfectly because it doesn't fit, and then put on a very minimal drum beat. So this is a really simple song, but one that just carries the load because it's so strange and kind of funky at the same time. I like this one. I make albums for you to just sit down and listen to the entire album from start to finish. Now, you don't have to, but to know that the track list is meaningful. So I did intend for it to flow this way. And once I completed all of the tracks for Godforsaken Journey, I looked at them and tried to arrange them in such a way that it would make for a nice listening experience. And I'm not sure why I thought this one would follow 5,000 Dimensions, but it does. And this is Stare It Down, also featuring one of my late-night Gaia 2 recording sessions. And a very interesting drum beat created by the Nord Drum. You know what? I was wrong. That's not Gaia 2. That's Roland Juno X. Sorry. It's a very Gaia-ish sound coming out of the Juno. And why did I use the Juno for this one? You know, I don't even remember. This was like one of these super late-night recording sessions where I stumbled on this kind of wonky beat on the Juno and then just started poking away on the keyboard until something happened, and then captured it as a sequence and recorded some stuff. And the drums were really hard to do in this album. I think I struggled with this one for a while, and I went to the Nord Drum, and I've hundreds of presets of various Nord Drum sounds that I've created, and the Nord Drum is tricky to use after the fact. Like I start a song with the Nord drum because it's such a powerful, unique sound, and I don't tend to have a lot of luck putting it onto a song afterwards. But this one just kind of dropped into place, and like the stereo separation just really opened the track up with those highs, and it all came together into kind of a unique and weird sound in much the same way that I think 5,000 Dimensions sounds. Just kind of bizarre and different and moody. Hard to put a finger on what it is, but there it is, and here it is on this new album from Omega Ronin. There we go into Mystical Energy Field, which is a big song, maybe too big. It's possible I have too many bass lines going in Mystical Energy Field, but I don't care. I listened to it on a whole bunch of different speakers and headphones, and I'm like, you know what? This just owns everything, so I'm going to leave it the way it is. Admittedly, this is a very sloppy song, but sometimes I'll make these tracks and I'll sit on them for like 2 weeks. That's what I did here. I made it, I heard it, and I'm like, all right, I might be able to refine that later, but I'm gonna set it aside for 2 weeks, and I'll come back to it and maybe rethink the bass line or something. And I came back after 2 weeks, and I'm like, this is just the way this song is meant to be. Done. So, and then frequently I'll do that. If I'm knee deep in mixing a song or editing it, it's like the same part of my brain that hits editing. Like, all I can ever see is the edit. So I hear the song, and I'm like in my brain looking at the timeline. So I'm like, all right, I know these notes are there, and that the timeline's this color, and that thing's coming up here. And then when I forget all of that after a few weeks, I just listen to the song as if I'm actually just listening to it, and not like watching a timeline. Then I just hear the song in a different way, and I like just the muddy, sloppy, just kind of nasty atmosphere of this one. Mystical Energy Field. And if you don't get the reference, come on. I had a lot of fun with drums on this particular song. I've been getting more experimental with my drum beats lately, and this is another one where I struggled with the drums until I came across this like big kind of deep toms with a lot of reverb sunk into the mix, and I think it adds a nice atmospheric element, and it's also just fun to listen to and guides your ear through the song until the next track, where I mix it up a bit and break form, going into something a little happier, a little more bouncy, using a sequence I built on the Gaia 2 titled Casio, inspired by the old school Casio keyboards. I talked about this in the last podcast. Well, here's the finished track titled My Robot Calculator Watch. How many of us had robot calculator watches? They were so cool. my robot calculator watch, featuring the Juno on top of all of that. For what reason, I don't know. I tried it and I'm like, that's weird. Okay, that works. So it's an interesting mix of Juno X, Gaia 2, and the TR-8S providing some beats. I was thinking about making a video segment, where I was going to ride my bike out to the woods and make some songs on the Mega Synthesis and film it and post. You know, like, what else are you going to post on social media? It all sucks. So I'm like, all right, I'll just make some stuff in the woods. I'm going to call the segment Mark Beats in the Woods. Then I decided that's maybe not a great idea. But you know what is a great idea? Is this next track, which is titled Savor the Sorrow. That's a busy song. There's like a little bit of every keyboard that I own in there. The haunting lead is the Juno, because if you really want to cut through a mix, the Juno is your knife. And I stumbled across that sound, and I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with it, but I'll set it aside. And then when I was working on this song, I unearthed it and just built a very simple sequence, and it just works perfectly. And that's one of the last songs on the album. Actually, I created the core of that entire song, like the structure. There's probably a musical term for this, I don't know. But like, I created the actual the backbone of this song on Korg Gadget 2 on the iPad, which I'll frequently use if I want to push myself into a key that I don't use normally. And like, the Korg Gadget is just great training wheels for those of us who kind of suck at music theory stuff. So it's like a nice way to lock you into a key. And I wanted to push myself into some different directions with this album, some stuff that just didn't sound like my older stuff. And even a song, the one that comes to mind is Gravity Betrays, because I made that lead not really thinking about what key I was in. I just made it, and I liked it. So I went to my key cheat sheet and just figured out what key it was, and then matched the rest of the song to that. So look at me, I've gotten through 3rd grade music class. Billy passed the 1st grade. Let's have a party. This is a freaking weird-ass song titled Silicon Life Generator, and can anyone figure out what's in it? You'll be quizzed on it tomorrow. That's Gaia 2 as the lead there, because nothing else sounds like that, and a very bizarre and wonky Juno X bass line combined with the Mega Synthesis drums. It shouldn't work at all, but it does. It just keeps getting better, too. I'm pretty pleased with this one. I'm not sure how I made it, but somehow I should just credit the gear. Like, it's the keyboards that did it. I just banged on them and stuff happened, and then here it is. Actually, the lead came from one of my late night just tinkering recording sessions when I came up with that sound on the Gaia 2, and I'm like, I have no idea how I'm ever going to use this. And it's easy enough to put a drum beat onto a weird sequence, but the bass line had to somehow like complement the lead and rise above it. And like, I have a couple just strange bass presets on the Juno, And it occurred to me that there's this one I have, like the one I used, and I thought it would sound neat, and it does. So that's a good example of just getting more and more familiar with the gear over time. It's like anything. If you do it every day, you're going to get pretty good at it. Or at least you'll get into a routine of sucking. So it depends on if you like the music or not. This next track is titled Dark Winds on Planets Beyond, and the lead is a combination of the Gaia and the Juno. I created first this sound, a preset on the Gaia, which included a lot of like wind effects, and I liked it a lot, so I saved that, made a very basic sequence, and then as I went into recording, I then created a similar sound on the Juno and combined the two, and that's the backbone of the song is like these weird like wind like effects, which is why I called it Dark Winds on Planets Beyond. So I ended up with a bunch of keyboards by now, and my favorite part of producing music is just finding new and unique and strange ways to mix all of them. Because you can make any sound out of your computer or your phone or an iPad or whatever. Like a $20 program like Korg Gadget will get you all the way into a finished, well-produced song if you spend enough time with it. But what's fun is to take these different keyboards that have different characters or different drum machines or synthesizers or whatever, analog, digital, and just mix them and just see what happens. And that's 90% of my musical creation journey these days is what's going to happen if I just combine all of these things in strange new ways. And of course that's the whole thing with modular, is that you can just chain all this stuff together. No, I haven't really gotten into modular specifically, but it's a similar thing. You can just take the same MIDI file and just make it sound like two completely different songs depending on what gear you're using, and just two completely different atmospheres. And that's a lot of what this album is it's experimenting. It's me experimenting with my gear and just tying it all together and just seeing what happens with no real specific agenda in sight. Here we go. This is the last song I made for the album, titled Carnival of Consternation, because someone had to call a song like that, so it was me. And from there we go into what was going to be the last song on the album, titled The Huntress. It's now the second to last song on the album because I felt like I needed to end on something just totally wonky and out there. And that's always a good spot for the last track on an album. If you have like one song that you just don't know where... Like if you have one song left that just doesn't fit but it's still a good song, put it on the end. Or the beginning. You know what, doesn't matter. Don't listen to me. I put them on the end sometimes. Like Future Year 1982 is my template for this, for my first album titled Future Year 1982. The last song is a joke track inspired by Star Trek 4, where the main beat comes off of the Casio keyboard I had as a kid. Not the same one, but the same model. Anyway, it's a terrible song, but kind of funny, which is why it's the last track. And I still carry that same philosophy over to my most recent album, Godforsaken Journey. This next track is titled The Huntress. And the lead is built... This is very rare, I don't do this very often, but the lead sounds in there are straight out of the Korg Gadget 2 on my iPad. So, yes, you can have a $20 software program providing the lead song on one of the biggest tracks on an album. The lead sound on one of the biggest tracks on the album, though the rest of the song is primarily Juno. But that like funky bass line, that's Korg. Hey, that's fun. That song really builds too. So like by the end of it, it's like this wall of sound and it picks up pace and it's a pretty cool song. The next one, the last track on the album, is titled Mainframe Manipulation. A song that started out as a very dark and brooding song with this like sinister matriarch bass line that I just couldn't get it to work. Like some of my tricks that I'll use with the Juno gear and like the Gaia just don't work with the matriarch. It just has like a mind of its own. And like I couldn't quite get this thing to work, and like the sequence wasn't really coming together. So I ended up just shortening the release on the bass line. So instead of just like droning out, it's like a much shorter, end to the note. And I put a drum beat on it, and it just turned into this funky ass song that I love. Doesn't fit the album at all, but maybe it's a nice segue into the next album. This is titled Mainframe Manipulation. The album is Godforsaken Journey from Omega Ronin. It's on all the major music services, Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, whatever. If you like it, check it out. And thank you for listening. I'm going to go try to sneak a power nap in there before my kids get back. So keep on rocking, and we'll talk about some different stuff next week on Omega Ronin, the podcast.